nearly 1,500-page verdict of the Supreme Court on Aadhaar is something which will be looked into very carefully over the next few days. But it is also a verdict which has a bit of something for everyone. What does it mean for the Congress party and for someone who has been deeply involved with Aadhaar from the initial stages is what I'm hoping Praveen Chakravarthy will tell me today. He's, of course, Chairperson of the Data Analytics Department of Indian National Congress and has also worked with Nanda Nilikani, I think, in the initial days of Aadhaar, Praveen.
That's right.
How do you look at this judgment today in that context?
See, the judgment, I think, is a very balanced judgment. There was some questions raised about Aadhaar in terms of its efficacy as a tool, governance tool to improve efficiencies. And I think the Supreme Court's clearly said that that it has upheld that Aadhaar is indeed a good tool to improve efficiencies in governance. The Supreme Court perhaps has also said that maybe there are some social costs to Aadhaar, costs of privacy, costs of exclusion. And hence the Supreme Court has gone on to dilute some of the provisions that would have enabled organizations other than government organizations to have used Aadhaar.
Section 57.
That's right. That's right. So if you kind of step back and think of what is Aadhaar, Aadhaar is essentially a technology tool that improves efficiencies. Now, it can improve efficiencies for governments. If it can do that, it can also improve efficiencies for others, be it private sector, non-government organizations, non-profits, all of that. By distinguishing between the two, the Supreme Court has clearly said that there are implicit costs of Aadhaar as a tool, and we believe that democratically elected governments are better placed to bear those costs of privacy than the private sector, which we perhaps don't trust as much as we do. So all it tells me is that I hope the current government lives up to the tall expectations that the Supreme Court has set.
I want to rewind back to when Aadhaar was in its initial stages. You were, of course, involved in Aadhaar then, not as a political entity. You are now with a political party which has given birth to Aadhaar, but is not quite sure what to do with it in its current avatar. In the initial stages, wasn't Aadhaar clearly seen as something which would be used with the private sector as well? And in that context, isn't today's judgment a blow to that original thought?
No, I don't think that's true in terms of we did not know what Aadhaar was envisaged for, or we do not know how to deal with it today. It was very, very clear. It was always envisaged as a tool to improve governance efficiencies. And like I said, we've also said that there are costs of privacy. You cannot, choice was a very fundamental design in the way Aadhaar was originally thought of, which is you could opt in, and or if you wanted, you could get an Aadhaar. Or if you don't want it, you did not need to get an Aadhaar. Aadhaar was never mandatory for enrollment in its, at least when the UPA was in power, right? And that's pretty much what the Supreme Court has upheld today.
In part, not for government services and welfare and benefits.
See, the part about government, the welfare and benefits, what is Aadhaar for? If Aadhaar is a tool for efficiencies, and how does it achieve efficiencies? If I have to give out, say, PDS, and I do know that there are inefficiencies because of duplicates and ghosts, as we call it, and if Aadhaar as a tool can remove those and bring in potential benefits of savings and efficiency, then it is quite logical to ask for Aadhaar as a requirement to avail of those benefits, and I think that's perfectly logical. And that's what the Supreme Court has said. What I meant by mandatory or not was nobody, no citizen in this country was mandated to go register for Aadhaar if he or she did not need a certain benefit or a service.
May I just come in here? That's fine to say, but when you are going to use Aadhaar for pretty much everything, you're not really leaving the citizen with any choice.
And that is true. And that's, I think, exactly where the Supreme Court judgment today has come in and says we accept the efficiency part of the argument. We do not accept the back-handed mandatory nature of the program, and that's pretty much what the Supreme Court has said. And in that sense, you're right. So The Supreme Court, by saying this, has said you can't make it mandatory for everyone. Leave that as a choice. If it's for efficiency, for purposes that you use government taxpayer money for, which is from the Consolidated Fund of India, to improve efficiencies, ask for Aadhaar. And I think that's a very balanced judgment.
You know, Praveen, one point is, since you were with the initial team of Aadhaar, and Nandan's not speaking to us yet, what do you think that the initial team would think looking at how Aadhaar has been put under scrutiny to such detail today by the Supreme Court, and not all of it has come out smelling of roses? What would the team think of today?
See, I can't speak for Nandan or any of the others specifically, but I think it's fair to say, when I look back and think of what the original kind of design and the goal and the ambition for the project was, I think it'd be fair to say that the team would be a trifle disappointed. And I say that not because there was a very engineer's view of Aadhaar back then, that Aadhaar was about efficiency, Aadhaar was about solving a problem, Aadhaar was going to make India better.
You all didn't see these privacy concerns coming up then?
You know,
privacy, data theft, everyone's data together, just waiting to be hacked, all of those concerns.
See, Tamna, is a great question, actually. Did we see it? I mean, there was talk of a lot of talk of privacy. I think the question is, did we think it was as big an issue, as important an issue? When I look back now, perhaps not. And I'll tell you why I say that. When people would come and say there are privacy issues, or let's say there were issues of social exclusion, which was a big thing. Some people were denied some service because of Aadhaar. Our response would always be that, but then it has saved so many crores of rupees in costs, in savings.
Come on.
See, it's
the one person who has died of starvation has the same right.
You're absolutely right, Tamanna. You're absolutely right. And we've certainly learned that after demonetization, right? That the means is as important as the ends. And perhaps that's the biggest learning for a lot of us who, from those initial days, because, see, we should not take away the fact that this is indeed a remarkable project and a revolutionary project that can certainly deliver enormous benefits, efficiency benefits. We perhaps underestimated the costs. When I say the costs, social costs, costs of exclusion, costs of privacy, all of that. And I think that's what the Supreme Court judgment today, ruling today, as kind of, in a way, told us. You guys didn't think as deeply about these things as you should have.
Do you think Aadhaar is really as safe as it's made out to be? 13-foot walls and all of that?
No, I absolutely believe Aadhaar is technologically safe. I do think Aadhaar is technologically foolproof. That is entirely different from the social costs of Aadhaar, which I think are perfectly valid and legitimate.
From the day that you envisioned private operators becoming a part of the enrollment process, that would possibly have been the first red flag. You knew there could be some leakage there, as we have seen consecutively. People using software to enroll ghost enrollments for a price. People leaking database for a price. These have been newspaper reports that have come up.
See, I challenge this fundamental premise that private entities are far more susceptible to corruption and devious means than public sector entities, and I don't think that's true at all. So I don't think it's a question of private versus public. I think it's a question of some people misusing the enrollment process and some others don't. Because the counterfactual question to that would be, had we not indulged private entities and only done it through public, are we saying there was going to be no theft and enrollment errors?
So you were okay with this? Give me your Aadhaar to connect to buy a SIM card and connect your Aadhaar to your bank account, Zabardasti. You were okay with this in the initial days?
No. See, I think it's not as blatant as you put it. Let's say opening a bank account with an Aadhaar because of KYC process takes 5 minutes versus 5 days. I mean, there's clearly productivity gains for everybody to see. So why would anyone not be? it's not so much about give me your entire life's history and then you will open a bank account. It wasn't that way. It was entirely about efficiency. 5 minutes versus 5 days. The data is secure. It's technologically foolproof. Then it comes down to efficiency gains. But I've already admitted to you, yes, we perhaps didn't think as, or at least I can speak for myself, we didn't think as hard and deep as we should have around the social costs.
If you could go back in time, what would you put on the agenda of the next meeting in hindsight of everything that has developed in the last many years?
Don't roll out Aadhaar until we have a law.
Wow. That perhaps would be the biggest regret as well?
You can't fault us for not trying. We tried. We had a draft law. We had a draft privacy law. I mean, it wasn't in our domain or a scope to actually get a law passed. I mean, we were not that. We were not elected representatives. But when we put out a draft, it was rejected by the standing committee chaired by Mr. Yashwant Sinha, of which Mr. Piyush Goyal was a very vociferous opponent of the project. So it's very glad to see that my friend Piyush is actually jubilant over the Supreme Court judgment over Aadhaar. I remember having long arguments with him about this. So we tried. You can't fault us for not trying. We did not have the majority.
If a Congress party came to power tomorrow, what would they change about the current Aadhaar Act?
See, I think we had lots of reservations about who can use the Aadhaar. I mean, who can use Aadhaar, for what it should be used, and in terms of who can appeal. I think the Supreme Court's done well to strike all of it. The Supreme Court's done well to dilute all of it down. I mean, Joint Secretary level officer being granted exceptions to access Aadhaar data in the interest of national security, we thought was just fairly too wide and large, and the Supreme Court struck that down.
Now, I'm going to ask you the political question, which I know you hate, but you can't really run away from that political avatar of yours. The ruling party, the BJP and the NDA, is touting this as a great victory because they are the ones, and you will have to admit this, Praveen, as someone who has seen Aadhaar originating, they are the ones who've actually made sure that it is in everybody's life, whether they like it or not. And they say that this is a vindication of their push and faith and trust in Aadhaar, considering that government services now can use Aadhaar if, of course, they include any payout from the Consolidated Fund of India. Meanwhile, the Congress still is not very clear what they brought Aadhaar for and are opposing for the sake of it. I'm paraphrasing here the large commentary coming from the BJP side.
No, so I'm not here to do political point scoring. I will make that very clear. But it is completely wrong to say that the Congress does not know what its stand on Aadhaar is. The Congress party's stand on Aadhaar is fairly clear, which is, like I explained before, for efficiency benefits in government programs. I think you talked about coercion. You talked about coercing people to go and get an Aadhaar, say, for example, a mobile phone or a bank account, which is what was happening in the last. And that perhaps what set off this big firestorm. The Supreme Court's come down heavily on that. So I don't know on what basis you say that this is a victory for one party versus the other. What I see is there's something in it for everyone to dip into.
Now let's put on your initial team of Aadhaar hat again. Effectively, after this judgment, can an Indian citizen get by without an Aadhaar card, or does this, at the end of the day, impact the few and important voices who said that I don't want to be forced into giving my Aadhaar card for a SIM connection or for a bank account? But apart from that, if you have to file returns, you need an Aadhaar card. For most government services, you need an Aadhaar card. How does it really change anyone's life?
Change it? I mean, I thought the whole point of Aadhaar was to change everybody's lives, and I thought that was the whole argument about.
From yesterday to tomorrow.
Yes, perhaps it's not changed much from yesterday to tomorrow, but if you look at it as India pre-Aadhaar and India post-Aadhaar, I think there are some significant changes. Right? Now, if your question is, can an Indian citizen today or a resident of India live in India without an Aadhaar? Perhaps no, because I hope everyone is a decent tax-paying, law-abiding citizen, in which case you would need an Aadhaar. So the simple answer to your question is no. But I think what you're also alluding to is, I mean, by restricting Aadhaar from private use, but by making it mandatory for something as basic as filing taxes, you've pretty much...
What's the big change?
You've pretty much said that everyone should get an Aadhaar, and if that's your argument, I concede. I mean, I think that's the Supreme Court's verdict.
Does this also show about how an act which was being challenged right from 2010, and now we're sitting in 2018 when there's finally a verdict, in this time has spread so quickly? Its usage has spread so quickly that in effect what the Supreme Court has done today is trying to put a genie back in its bottle. How much can really be said and done? Because if so many Indians have an Aadhaar card today, 1.1 billion Indians have an Aadhaar card today, and they are free to use them, probably used to using them, and not all of them think it's a problem to use them.
See, there are two parts to this, Namana. I mean, first, it is my view that it should be whatever the Supreme Court's judgment or ruling was, it should have been regardless of how many people had Aadhaar. Because the conceptual understanding of Aadhaar in terms of its benefits and costs should not change the fact that so many people have Aadhaar. In economics, we call these sunk costs. So sunk costs are sunk, and that should have been irrelevant to the judgment. And I hope that is indeed the case. How many people have Aadhaar should not have had any bearing on the ruling on Aadhaar, which was, does it violate privacy? Does it violate fundamental rights of Indian citizens? And the Supreme Court has said...
No, I'm not sure if the Supreme Court has taken it as a parameter. That's a question I'm raising.
I hope
how much
not
can
is
you
what I'm saying.
Yeah, how much can you change now that so many people have Aadhaar? Okay, last point. There have been some reports that the Congress party is planning to challenge this judgment or parts of it with a larger constitutional bench. The Congress has been behind a lot of the protests against Aadhaar in its current form. Is this something that the party is now going to let go?
No, so you have to actually correct this. Permit me some nuance. I think this entire Aadhaar ruling, if nothing, is about nuance, right? The Congress party's opposition primarily, and the case that it took up in the courts, was Aadhaar being passed as a money bill.
Yeah.
Being legislated as a money bill. We continue to believe that that was wrong. We've had one dissenting judge call that a fraud on the Constitution, with very, very strong words from Justice Chandrachud. Even in the other four judges that have delivered the majority verdict, in the Aadhaar as a money bill part, they've actually gone on to say that the Speaker's decision to categorize that as a money bill can be subject to challenge. And that was one of the two questions that were asked, because the ruling party said the Speaker's decision is binding and final. The courts actually, even in its majority verdict, has said that that is subject to judicial review. So we continue to insist that Aadhaar as a money bill was a backhanded way of bringing Aadhaar, an important bill such as Aadhaar, on the law of the land. And whether we challenge that or not, we will wait and see. So right. That is the only opposition that the Congress party has.
So the option's still open?
That we will have to wait and see, but I want to be very clear, Aadhaar as a money bill is very different from Aadhaar as a tool for improving government welfare efficiency.
All right. It's unlikely, though, I think, that we've heard the last of challenges to Aadhaar from a lot of comments that have come out today. But thank you so much, Praveen, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks.